Today is the official start of hurricane season. Do you remember how active last year's hurricane season was? So active, meteorologists ran out of names for them. 30 named storms hit the U.S., including 14 hurricanes. So we got a year coming up. What does it look like? Heather Sells brings us this.
2020 brought more than a pandemic. It brought a record-setting hurricane season with 30 named storms and 14 hurricanes.
Look at the windows blown out of that building.
It started in mid-May and ended in late November.
We've got tree damage to virtually every tree. We have building damage to virtually every building.
Forecasters predict another active season this year, but perhaps not quite as tough. WeatherBell and NOAA both predict up to 20 named storms and anywhere from half a dozen to a dozen hurricanes. 3 to 5 could be major. The Gulf and Mid-Atlantic states may fare the worst, with risks predicted 6 times the normal impact. Less severe further up the East Coast. Warmer waters, La Niña conditions, and other factors will likely all play a role in shaping what's to come. And meteorologists warn that storms can stay offshore and still blast communities with hurricane-like conditions despite not having made landfall. For now, those at risk can take advantage by prepping supplies and checking evacuation routes. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Well, thanks, Heather. Joe Bastardi is chief meteorologist for WeatherBell Analytics. He's also the author of The Weaponization of Weather in the, quote, phony climate war. And Joe joins us now. What can we expect in the months ahead?
Well, first of all, like I love to do is put things in perspective. Last year, my company not only tells you how many they're going to be, or we try to tell you, only God knows tomorrow, but we also showed where they were going to go. And, that was almost divinely, it had to be divinely inspired last year because of the fact that when it was all said and done, it looked like our forecast was basically showed exactly where they were going to go. We had the Northwest Gulf loaded up. We had the situation up the eastern seaboard. And this year we expect similar high impact year, not as bad as last year. Now, let me put this in perspective, okay? While we had 30 storms last year, did you know for a major hurricane season, the storms were the weakest per storm on record? We have something called the ACE index. I'll give you an example. In the 1950s, the average storm would pile up an ACE index between 10 and 14. Last year, there were only 6 because you have a lot of storms out in the middle of nowhere that are getting named nowadays because we can see them and because the naming criteria is a little bit different. Secondly, in the Pacific Ocean, we had the second lowest total on record out there as far as the ACE index goes. And the Pacific is a much bigger indicator of climate than the Atlantic. It's 4 times the size of the Atlantic, and you get a lot more action out there. This year, what we're expecting is a similar year to last year, more storms out at sea. But the problem we have on the United States coastline, again, is due to the overall weather pattern, the development of storms in close to the coast. You notice Laura, Harvey, Michael, the big hitters, they all develop within a couple of days of the coast. The long track storms tend to weaken as they come to the coast. And what we are also concerned about is that one of these African waves, instead of staying out, or instead of even coming in and moving due north up the coast like the classic storms do, may take what we call the shortcut. What's the shortcut? 1933, Virginia Beach hurricane came in from the southeast rather than hit from the south. Hugo hit Charleston from the southeast. Isabel hit Cape Hatteras, that area from the southeast. 1903, the Vagabond hurricane in Atlantic City hit from the southeast. These are storms that come in off the water rather than sweeping up the coast, and they have a quite different impact. If you get hit in Virginia Beach, the Tidewater area, from a storm coming from the southeast, what happens is it pushes water back into Chesapeake Bay, so much so that leads to more extensive flooding. The New Orleans situation here would be a Category 2 or 3, with Katrina, would be a Category 2 or 3 hurricane that makes landfall on the North Carolina-Virginia border and shoves the tidal surge back into Virginia Beach. Same thing in Philadelphia and Wilmington. Same thing for Atlantic City. You saw what Sandy did in New York City when it hit from the east in southern New Jersey. So we've got that concern this year that we see one of those storms that comes in from the southeast, and that's something we've got outlined in our forecast too.
Joe, let me ask you one question. I understand that the long-range weather, I mean, many, many years, that there's a shift from the warming to the cooling. Do you have any stats that indicate that we might be coming into a little ice age sooner or later?
No, I don't believe that for a second. I think, listen, I think a lot of the guys on my side of the global warming issue, and I'm not trying to get anybody mad, I think they want to see it cool so bad. They don't understand that the reason, listen, it's the total picture. It's always a total picture. People tell me, oh, it's CO2. CO2, excuse me, suffers destructive interference from all these other things that go on, just like the solar cycles. There's destructive interference to that. What are you going to do with the warm oceans? We even have something in the oceans. I'm sure you mariners out there know what a rogue wave is. All of a sudden, you're out in the middle of nowhere. This big wave comes along because it's an intersection of many things that developed far away that come together. Well, the same kind of things can happen in climate cycles. So what happens is people, it's interesting today, Pastor, in that people want one answer for one thing right now, rather than looking at the entire picture. I tell people all the time, you want to look scripturally at this, the words that are spoken in the Old Testament, it's still God, but he speaks a different way than what he does in the New Testament. But you got to look at the total picture of things, right? It's the same message, but the total picture. So it's not just one thing, it's a combination of everything.
We got you, Joe. Thank you so much for being with us. Joe Bastardi. Interesting.
It is interesting, and as usual, we all need to be prepared for whatever.
Yeah, well, I was there in New Orleans after Katrina, and boy, the devastation when that water begins to break through the levees. And he's talking about a blow coming that would push water, for example, in our area up into the tide water. Then we'd have serious flooding. Well, we'll see what happens. Pray.